I've certainly very much enjoyed working with all of the wonderful people I've had an opportunity to meet. And just to give a sense for who we are, so I work for the OSU Assistive Technology Center. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to come visit us, we are, as Deb mentioned, in Columbus at the Martha Morehouse Pavilion in West Campus. So part of the OSU Wexner Medical Center, which is why you see all that gray and scarlet over there in our recent group picture. But the Assistive Technology Center doesn't just offer communication technology, it also offers mobility technology, so powered mobility, like power wheelchairs, manual mobility, which would be just your kind of regular push wheelchairs. We also have a high-tech driver clinic, a driver rehab, a driver retirement program, a smart clinic, and the two colleagues that will be presenting at the next two webinars specialize in showing you how you can use your existing devices or get special new devices to be able to do things like access your computer, play games, really anything that you could do with technology, making sure that it's accessible equally for people with disabilities of different kinds. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have at the end about the services that we offer in the Assistive Technology Center and possibly how to get a referral so you can come say hello and hang out with us a bit. Okay, so here is the general outline of my presentation. So first off, just what am I talking about? What is communication technology and who currently uses it? Who might be able to use it? How do we go about turning text or symbols into speech output? Different ways to access or control your device. So maybe you don't have full use of your hands, and that's okay. We have lots of hands-free ways to control a device like a speech generating device or a computer. And then the question, like, what can you control with a speech generating device? So in addition to bossing other people around, can you potentially boss other devices around, like a smart speaker, a computer, even a power wheelchair? You can control with a speech generating device. So the whole goal of our clinic is to show how access to maybe just one type of device can really open up access. It can be like a key to unlock access to all sorts of different devices in your home and in your environment, which will hopefully make you a little bit more independent with the things that matter to you the most. Okay, so first question, what are you here to learn about today? Some of you might already be aware of or familiar with these sorts of devices. Has anybody, you can throw into the chat or just shout out, has anybody met anyone who uses a speech generating device or maybe is a person who currently, hello everyone in the Aphasia Initiative. I know you know people who use speech generating devices. Does anybody else on the call have any familiarity with this kind of device? I'm looking at the chat. Okay. Oh.
Someone said JAWS. Well, I just want to remind everybody, please turn off your microphones if you're just listening. We have some feedback going on.
Yeah, so a variety of people use speech generating devices. And you might not see the person using the device all the time. Maybe they only use the device in certain situations, and the rest of the time they use their facial expressions or their gestures, body language. So it's just one tool in your communication toolkit, which is the main thing I'd like to talk about next. So really, communication technology falls under the umbrella of augmentative and alternative communication. That's a very long and kind of inaccessible way of saying that these are tools that help you communicate. They can either supplement or support your verbal speech, or they can replace your verbal speech in the event that, you know, it's difficult for you to speak. And the whole term AAC encompasses any form of communication at all other than verbal speech that's used to express thoughts, needs, wants, and ideas. And the truth is that every single one of us speaking or not, uses AAC on a daily basis. And I'm using it right now. I'm using my gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, posture. If I wanted to chat with one of you, I would open the chat box and I would type. That's not speech, that's something else. It's AAC. Handwriting, any form of social media posting, the conversations you can get into in the digital space, all of that can be considered augmentative and alternative communication. And all of that can be made more easily accessible by use of one of these assistive devices. And it's key to notice that no single communication method can be used to meet all communication needs. So we are not just disembodied voices. We live in bodies and we live in contexts, and we might, instead of asking for a drink of water, we might just go over to the refrigerator or point to the refrigerator to say, hey, I'm kind of thirsty, or I'd like something to eat. And to Deb's point, all different kinds of behaviors are communication, and you can often figure out what somebody wants just based on what they're showing you with their body or the sounds that they're making. And I would challenge any of you who do typically rely on verbal speech to try to go a whole day communicating only in emojis and see how far you get. But then if you take emojis out of texting, you lose something. So it's really a combination of different methods that shift and change over the course of a day, and depending on who you're talking to and the situation. Okay, but who tends to use AAC full-time as opposed to part-time? Generally, people who need to replace verbal speech have some kind of a disability that affects language comprehension or expression, such as aphasia, which is an acquired disability, typically from a brain injury or a stroke, that makes it difficult for you to put your ideas into words, even though you may know exactly what you want to say. There are other conditions that make it difficult to control the muscles involved in speech. So you might have weakness or tightness in your face, your tongue, and you just might have a kind of a differently shaped body than other people's. So here are some of the conditions that can contribute to difficulty with verbal communication. We have a range of developmental conditions like cerebral palsy, any form of intellectual disability, some stuttering also. People who stutter can benefit from augmentative communication. People who have had neurological illnesses often that get worse over time. People who have had a single injury and then are trying to recover from it. And then injuries or surgeries to the face or the neck, such as a tumor that needs to be removed from a person's tongue that makes it a little bit difficult for them to pronounce words the same way they may have before. So a whole range of people really can use alternative communication. And in fact, an estimated 40 million people, that's 12%, use AAC in one form or another to replace or supplement their verbal speech. So if you are on this call and you use AAC, you are not alone, trust me. Okay, one thing just a myth I want to bust right out of the gate is that the only people who can use AAC are people who can't speak at all or who have extremely minimal verbal speech. And in fact, these days, more and more, especially in the autistic community, people are finding that it's good to be able to fall back on a method like handwriting or typing or text to speech in moments when they might be feeling overwhelmed, or it's difficult for them to project their voice and make themselves understood. Maybe situations where you might have laryngitis and you can't speak temporarily. Really, this technology is for everyone, not just for people who are completely unable to speak. And also, speech isn't always the best method. You're not necessarily going to use speech if you're trying to put your thoughts into writing and deliver them. There are lots of different ways to communicate, and speech is only one potential tool in a toolkit. And I'll be going into some of these additional tools, which again, you may be familiar with, maybe not familiar with over the next section. So here are just a couple of examples where speech might not be the best form of communication. Being sick, being worn out, emotionally overwhelmed, in maybe loud or noisy environments, you might use like sign, like I'm going over there, or like come over here. You might use texting or calling over long distances. Using text to speech over the phone can be good if you have a voice that's kind of difficult to understand through the phone. Can anybody else think of any other examples of where maybe speech just won't do it for you? Deb, I think you're talking, but you got...
Probably telling secrets.
Yeah, telling secrets. That's a good one. Anybody else? I've seen a lot of different creative uses of this type of technology. And you know what's exciting is that more and more people are using it just because they like it and not necessarily because it's, you know, physically necessary. And the more people use it, the more we all kind of learn how to communicate with people who are non-speaking or who choose not to speak at different times.
I just want to say that I've met several people who use the texting because the spoken word, they can't process it, but they can process reading and then texting or typing. So
Absolutely.
Technology is amazing.
Yeah, reading text might be more accessible for someone than listening to what you say. And I know for our aphasia group down there, having written words, you know, words written out for you or having a picture of what's being talked about can really help supplement that verbal speech signal, which is not always the clearest. Okay. So these are just some nice little notes from people who do use augmented communication, kind of more on a part-time basis. But for those people who, you know, really have difficulty relying on their verbal speech at all, usually there's this combination of approaches we need to take. We need to adapt the environment. We need a quiet environment, one that's free of distractions. Maybe we need fewer people in the room. Maybe we need to set things up so it's just, you know, instead of a group of 15 people, make sure it's a group of 2 or 3. These are some ways that you can help your person feel supported in a communication situation. You might have to provide certain tools or perform certain strategies to make sure the person understands what's being said, and also to help them get their turn in a fast-moving conversation. So it might be that if someone has difficulty with communication, it just takes them a little longer. It's hard for them to get started or to jump in. And so creating and holding the space and maybe providing some extra wait time so that if the person does have something to say, they can jump in. Even that can be a very simple supportive strategy for making sure everybody gets to talk. And a lot of this comes down to communication partners. So a lot of people I work with, you know, when I ask them how confident they feel about their communication, the first thing they say is, well, it depends on the person I'm talking to. I might be talking to a person who is not receptive and isn't waiting for me, someone who makes me feel foolish or slow, or just isn't understanding or attempting to understand. And on the flip side, you might talk with someone who, you know, maybe you didn't get very many words out, but that interaction made me feel really good. I really feel like we understood each other there, and that they
Brain break.
kind of got the feeling behind my words. So I like to say that a communication partner can be the best communication device in terms of kind of pulling out the things that the person might need to say and kind of helping
Possibly, I don't necessarily
build the
feel
meaning
air. I just,
together.
I'm just close.
Because we're not on our own. We don't communicate all by ourselves.
Excuse me
Usually-
excuse me one second. Hang on to that thought. I'm just reminding people to please mute their microphones. I'll try to work on that. Audrey, go ahead.
No, unfortunately, this part is unilateral and not bilateral communication or bidirectional. But we'll get to the Q&A soon, I promise. So the idea is we don't really communicate all by ourselves in a vacuum. We make meaning together, and we wouldn't communicate if we didn't want to connect with the people around us. And the reality is that with the communication disability, the task of carrying on a conversation might fall a little bit more heavily on one person than another, but there's really no shame in that. And we don't need to be independent communicators, because again, we're not alone. You and your loved ones are a communication team. So whatever you do currently to make that connection and treasure that connection, even if it's just a hug or a joke, like an inside joke, that's all communication too. So I wanted to mention that, not so much independence only, but also a little bit of interdependence. Okay, so what is this technology? What does it do? Why do we recommend it? So you can see here on this page that there are lots of different ways to represent something like a keyboard. We tend to see like a standard keyboard layout where you type with maybe two hands, but on your smartphone, you are typing only one-handed usually. Maybe you're typing with two thumbs. And you might be using things like word prediction to kind of help yourself move faster. For someone who has no or minimal to no verbal speech, what basically happens is you type a message in, you generate a message, and then you press a button and you speak out loud. So I'm actually going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to switch my video to this speech generating device to give you a sense for how it works.
Hey there. Hey there. H. How are you doing? How are you doing?
Audrey, can you make that clearer?
Clearer? You mean it's a little blurry?
A little blurry.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do too much about the quality of the camera, unfortunately. It is what it is, but let me see. I can jump quickly into the video settings. Touch up my appearance. Okay. I think the more people who are on the call, kind of the more stressed out the camera, the streaming gets.
Okay.
So it's good news. We got a lot of people on, but it might be a little bit blurry. So
Yeah, maybe when you're touching the key, just read out what the word is on the key.
Absolutely. I was just gonna hit speak and speak the whole thing.
Okay.
Ready?
Hey there. How are you doing?
So that's the basics of the speech generating device. You enter text somehow, and then you speak it out loud using the built-in speech synthesizer. You can also save certain phrases that you might want to speak all together. So for instance, if you don't want to type this whole thing out, you could say,
thank you for everything.
Or
let's see what's on TV.
So what you're doing is you're grabbing a stored message out of a whole library of messages.
I'd like to go outside. I'd like to go outside in a little while.
All right, so that's just a quick example, and I'm going to switch back to my presentation. Just have to change my camera and then share my screen again. I tried to do this in a savvier way, but this was the best way to do it in the end. Okay, so that's a little preview of how we turn text into speech. But some people will use symbol or picture-based communication, especially if they have trouble with their reading or their writing. And a lot of people you may know with developmental disabilities will at least start out on a system where they have a little picture and gradually transition to using text and words if they can. Whereas other people who have maybe acquired literacy problems, like they had an injury and now they can't read or write as well anymore, they can also use these symbols to make reading and writing just more accessible to them. Some people like the symbols, some people don't. Some people think they look a little bit childish, but some people prefer to use real pictures. And I just wanted to give a little example there of, sometimes a real picture is the most accessible way to represent something, and sometimes it's just a lot to look at. There's, the trees and the ground and the dappling light, and for someone with visual difficulties or someone with a cortical visual impairment, it might be difficult for them to kind of pick out what the main parts of the picture are. And so that's when a symbol-based system can really be more effective. But regardless of how you enter the information, like either you type it in as texting, or if you pick out pictures, what the device is doing is it's producing written text that it then speaks aloud, or it can enter it elsewhere. So you could, for instance, select dinosaurs or your favorite dinosaur, like the Mosasaurus, and then you could click a button that would allow that word to enter a search engine to pull up videos of a Mosasaurus or give you facts about a Mosasaurus. And you can do that just by clicking on the picture of the Mosasaurus, which kind of helps make the internet and browsing a little bit more accessible for some people with disabilities. And I'm gonna share again this example of symbol-based communication. I hope you can see that a little bit more clearly.
I would feel better.
So you're typing on this kind of adaptive keyboard, and you see these little symbols on here.
Listen to this.
And then it translates it into speech, and then the speech is read aloud by the computer. You can have all sorts of different types of symbol-based setups. They don't all have to be this complicated. If I can quickly pull up a favorite one for some adults I work with who just kind of want the basics. You can say,
I want to listen to music.
so you can say it in just 3 quick hits. Or you can say,
I need a snack.
and as you can tell, there is some learning that goes into these systems. You have to use them enough to figure out where things are. You might want to change some of the images on there to make it a little bit easier for your loved one to figure out what is meant by each of the symbols or each of the message areas. I do have, for instance, a gentleman with Down syndrome who learned ASL signs at one point. And so he uses some ASL signs, and then we have pictures of those same ASL signs on his device so that he can match that kind of nonverbal, non-sound output and use a device instead. All right, so I'm gonna swap again.
I have a quick question, Amy. Excuse me, Audrey.
Yeah,
um, I was going to ask you, what program do you use? Is there a specific program that goes with a device, or are there a lot of options?
there are a lot of options. And so it's really good if you are considering symbol-based communication to meet with a speech pathologist who specializes in augmentative communication to make sure that you're able to find the symbol system that best meets your loved one's needs. With a lot of the text-to-speech apps where you're just typing and then speaking a string of text, those tend to be a little bit more flexible. More people can use them, whereas the symbol system needs to be pretty specialized to the individual. So there aren't kind of specific apps that I would recommend, especially for symbol users. Instead, if you meet with a speech language pathologist, they'll show you all sorts of options and you can figure out, what do I like? What makes sense to me? What's too complicated or doesn't say what I want it to say. So you might need to do a little bit of trial and error, and you can even do a home trial once you've chosen a device. You can take it home for a month, try it out, see if that's what you like. If you want to try a couple of different vocabularies, you can do that. And I want to just put in a quick plug for the Assistive Technology of Ohio loan closet, where you can borrow some of these devices and start to figure out what you like and don't like. But generally speaking, there are enough options that it's good to have someone to guide you through and someone who can help you set up some of these trial periods to make sure that you get the best language system that fits you. That's a great question. Anybody else? All right, moving along. Okay, so I just mentioned the other option, which is kind of text to speech. It's again, a little bit more flexible, a little bit more, you can get it in lots of different forms. You can get it on your tablet, you can get it on your phone, or on a dedicated speech generating device, just depending on what you need. But this is the first system I showed you where you can type into a keyboard and the device will speak it out loud. Oftentimes it's available just as a free or a low cost app on your personal phone or tablet. And if anybody's curious, in the Q&A session, I'm happy to pull up my phone and show you some examples of this technology if you just want to try out a free version. The nice thing about using text to speech instead of just simple typing is it gives you a voice and it helps you get people's attention. It also allows you to talk on the phone or talk to young children who might not be able to read what you're writing or who can't understand you very well. And an SLP can help you set up one of these apps. A lot of times a tech savvy family member can also help with one of these apps, but really if you want to get the most out of it, again, you'll kind of come to clinic, try out a couple of different options, see what you like and what you don't like, so you can be an informed consumer, because that's my whole goal. Okay, some hot tips if you are thinking, man, I just want to download one of these right now. You should, if choosing an app, you want to choose one that allows you to save messages that you type or speak a lot so that you're not constantly typing the same thing over and over. Similar to what I just showed you, you can have stored messages that you access more quickly. Especially for people who have some visual problems, you want an app that will allow you to change the text size or reduce the number of options on the screen. You might want an app that will allow you to add pictures, or one where you can have the label say one thing and the device say another. So for instance, if you want to introduce yourself and say, my name is Audrey Hall, you might just put the label name on that button and then it says something else. If you want to be able to share the same app across multiple devices, so you can use multiple devices to communicate, that will kind of depend on which app you choose. How loud you're able to get will depend on the device that you're using. So if you're using a smaller device like a phone, the voice is not going to get very loud just because the speaker that's built into your phone is not very loud. A tablet will be louder, but if you want to, you can also purchase one of these wearable Bluetooth amplifiers to really get your voice out there. And those can usually clip onto a wheelchair or a belt loop, and allow you to get more volume than you could get from a built-in speaker. And if all of this app stuff seems like too much work, there is another way. You can use built-in accessibility settings on any phone, tablet, or computer to just highlight and speak out loud some string of text. So you might do this if you are visually impaired or dyslexic, to have things read aloud to you. Those same tools can be used by someone who types to communicate, with or without any communication software. There are lots of different ways to do it. And just here's a quick overview. I mostly put this slide up not because I support any single one of these, but more to say that, you know, some families come to me and they tell me, oh, I spent $70 on this text-to-speech system and it renews every year. So I have to pay $70 every year. I just want you to know that there are free, good versions of things out there. And, you know, up to usually $50 will get you quite a good value, at least for text-to-speech options. Symbol-based options, you might notice, tend to be a little bit more expensive because there's more design that goes into them. You know, they're full language systems rather than a standard keyboard. And if you're interested in using your phone to communicate, text-to-speech is not the only way to do it. You can use, as I mentioned, the accessibility settings on your phone for all sorts of things. You can also pull up your contacts list or a calendar. You can grab your photo album from your phone to show pictures of family members or recent vacations you've been on, just to give a little bit of shared context. You might even pull up a calculator to indicate the number of stairs in your house, or you know, just as a way to support your verbal speech as you communicate. And another shout out to the members of the Aphasia Initiative. I know a lot of you are professionals at using your phones to help clarify your message, including pulling up maps or, you know, things that you've posted on social media, so that once you've put a lot of work into creating a message, you can then share it with multiple people across multiple environments. All right. And then lastly, things that are kind of not commercially available, speech generating devices. These are kind of fancier devices for people who have more unique needs, and they generally are, you know, a benefit and a right that's available to you through your insurance. If you think you could potentially benefit from one of these devices, you can use it in addition to your personal devices, or you can use it instead of your personal devices. You can even use it to control your personal devices if you're really savvy. You can send text messages from a speech generating device. You can place calls from a speech generating device. And the technology can help you get online to search for information or to connect with people from a distance. Some main things that make a tablet or a phone different from a speech generating device include this durable case, the handle, the kickstand, and the built-in amplifier. I should also mention there are often battery extenders, and I'm mentioning that in part because I need to plug my computer in. Batteries only go so long. If you need an alternative way to access your device, so maybe you don't have full use of your hands, a speech generating device can support hands-free ways to control communication software, including eye gaze or head mouse or switch scanning, and I'll get to those in the next couple of slides. Generally, a speech generating device will come with warranty and tech support. And again, your speech generating device comes typically through a speech therapist who will write for it, and not only write for it, but also set it up, provide you training, customize your software alongside you, support you as you test it out in different environments, and then report back for what needs to be changed or adjusted so that the device can be more assistive to you. So that's my job. And I know that Dr. Sontag is on this call too, and she also specializes in AAC, and there are a number of helpful clinics around town for completing these kinds of evaluations and doing this kind of training. I would say we have probably more AAC providers in larger cities like Columbus as opposed to rural areas. But it's certainly something you can inquire about at your local clinic. And as a kind of a bridge to the next section, communication can be complicated for all sorts of reasons. It's not always just about your voice or your speech. And being able to access a device can be complicated too, either because of some movement problem that you have, difficulty seeing or hearing. You might have a learning disability that makes it difficult for you to keep up in conversation or learn a new system of technology. Or you might have some sort of a language disability involving, again, that ability to turn an idea into words, or use a language other than English. So all of these things can complicate access to some extent. And so I wanted to kind of run through other ways to control these devices and maintain access to communication. Again, a lot of this work is done by a speech language pathologist and as part of a multidisciplinary assistive technology team to make sure that we find the easiest and most convenient way for you to maintain access to communication in your personal devices. So here are just some examples of adaptations for touch. If touch with your hands is hard for you, these are some kind of low-tech ideas for using with usually a touch screen, a capacitive touch screen they call it, because it conveys electricity from your finger to the screen and vice versa. If you need to get fancy because you don't have great use of your hands, you can use something like head tracking, which is a system that basically takes movements of your head and translates them into movements of a cursor on the screen. So again, this is a hands-free method, and if we have time, I'll demonstrate in the Q&A for people who are interested in seeing it in action. But I've provided all sorts of examples of different ways to track head movements, including a visual optical option, a gyroscope. So that's something that tracks movement through space. We've got wearable options that kind of look like glasses. And then the most kind of the newest option that's still in development involves facial recognition technology. So that same technology that allows you to use your face to unlock a personal device can also track, usually it's the tip of your nose as your head moves. And it uses that tip of your nose to create the cursor movement on the screen. Okay, here's another example, eye gaze. Some of you might have heard of this because it's very futuristic. It can be a little bit tricky to set up and maintain, but fundamentally it's for people who have very limited movement of really below the neck or limited control over their movements. And so what this system does is it shines infrared light at your eyes, and it looks for 2 points of reflection, your pupil and the shiny part of your eye called the corneal reflection. I think I have a picture of it here. Yeah. And then it'll track the movement of those 2 points around the screen to get a sense for where your eye is. And again, you're controlling usually a cursor with those eye movements. Generally speaking, you've got to be pretty still in order to use this method. And the device also has to be positioned and mounted carefully. And as you can imagine, this takes some training and some practice. So definitely follow up with your assistive technology specialist if you think this might be an access method that could work for you. I just wanted to show some kind of futuristic and cool ways that you can use eye gaze as an access method, just to show how even the smallest movement can be turned into a method of controlling all sorts of things in technologies these days. So you can control a computer, you could even drive or adjust your seating in a power wheelchair. And I wanted to put in a plug for adaptive gaming because that's up next, I think, next week. So you can use, eye gaze is just one way to play video games. Or beat your friends at solitaire. Well, that's actually that doesn't make any sense at all, does it? You play solitaire against yourself. Beat your friends at Words with Friends. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not much of a gamer. And then this last example of kind of hands-free ways of using a device would be switch scanning. So in this example, the device will kind of show you a highlighted box or even read the options allowed to you. And then as the cursor moves through your options, you click the button to select. So in the example that you see there, maybe I'm trying to press the number 2. So I'll click that first row and then it'll start scanning over. Do you want 1, 2, or 3? And when I see that 2 come up, I'll press my button again. Again, all examples of ways that you can use your device if you have trouble using your hands or any other reason. Okay. So once you get your communication software all set up and your access method and you feel like you're really cooking with gas, you're really able to communicate confidently in the environments you want to, we start looking at some other fun stuff you can do with your device. What are some other things you can control if you are using your speech generating devices, this kind of hub to unlock other devices? And one of the reasons I mention this is because, we live in a digital world. People with disabilities are increasingly, as with everyone else, getting online, contributing to conversation. And it's a really important skill for the job market to be able to be kind of tech savvy, internet literate, and this is actually a really cool growth area for people with disabilities who use assistive technology because it makes kind of typical workplaces more accessible by moving more things online, in the home, and speech generating devices are one part of a whole system that can help with access to work tasks. I do want to mention that there are barriers to people with disabilities using technology. And my guess is these barriers are part of what bring you all here today. You might not know where to get started. So there might be a lack of education on where to access services. There might be reduced access to equipment or inadequate support systems for implementation. The system might not be designed very well or very accessibly. And you might not have a support person there to help you troubleshoot and make it better. You might struggle with the complexity of this high-tech thing that needs to be charged and updated, and it chirps at you and it doesn't calibrate well and you just want to rip your hair out. That can happen. Thankfully, technology is getting better and better, and I see those sorts of complaints less and less. And I want to mention also, like, as technology becomes more mainstream, we all become a little bit more confident with troubleshooting, things like, have you tried turning it off and on again? Have you restarted it? So I do want to just openly acknowledge the barriers to inclusion, especially for young adults who are looking to transition to the working world and may not have had access to this technology before, or may not have had access to the appropriate services or providers with adequate training. And, this is it's from an article about young adults, but certainly for our full-grown adults who are experiencing the results of an injury or an illness, there's not always enough support in place to enable successful use of technology in the workplace. And again, I would definitely encourage you to seek out evaluations if you have goals that you think could be met with technology, because the good news is that these resources do exist. Again, if you live in a rural area, you might have to drive a little bit, but we promise we'll make it worth your while. And with more availability of telehealth services, a lot of times we can help you maintain your system in the home just through check-in calls from time to time. So just some food for thought there, and I'm happy to return to this slide if people want to talk about their prior experiences trying to access technology and maybe having it not go so well, which does happen. Okay, yes, excellent. So beyond speech, what else can an AAC device do for people with disabilities? Well, it can help you control a smartphone for calling, texting, video calling, and even mirroring, which is to create like, you got your small phone screen, and then you can blow it up big onto a tablet and then control your phone from your tablet. I know this is kind of inception. You've got tech inside of tech inside of tech, but it can really help the people who need it. An AAC device can help you control a computer through web searching, word processing, searching and streaming video, managing your email inbox, or getting on social media. Your robots will talk to each other. So a speech generating device will issue commands that can be understood by a smart speaker, which means you have access to controlling lights, fans, doors, playing music, checking the weather, asking Alexa to tell you a joke, setting alarms, managing your calendar, all just from that interaction between the speech generating device and the smart speaker. And also, again, as a little preview for next week, speech generating devices can be part of an adaptive gaming system. So you might use eye gaze with an online game, or you might use switch controls to do multiplayer games, or kind of collaborative games. So there are lots of different options that you'll learn about next week. Please do come back for that. It's going to be a blast. And here's just some quick graphics about kind of different things that you can control from a speech generating device, and what those interfaces tend to look like. So you can see that, if you were to look at or tap on the image of the fan, you could turn your own fan on and off if you have your smart fan set up and plugged in, and so on and so forth. So these are just some examples of ways you can make your home environment smart, which I believe will be covered in 2 weeks' time with my dear friend and colleague, Liz Gowan, our rehab engineer. Okay, in summary, and I think I actually am on time here, AAC for all, not just for some. Anybody can use AAC. Everyone does use some form of AAC, either full-time or part-time, maybe in only certain situations. But the more we all use it, the less stigmatized it is for people who need to rely on it full-time. And the more we all understand how to better communicate with one another. These systems can use either symbols or text, And you have lots of different ways to access those communication systems using your hands, your head, your eyes, or a switch, one of those buttons you press. And you can use it for a whole set of different things outside of just talking, texting, calling, posting on social media. And the last thing I want to leave you with is you can use either symbol or text-based systems to control things in your home to make you more independent. And again, you'll learn about that in just a couple of weeks. Questions?
Okay, before we start question, would everybody just quickly do the survey I just put a link in for? It's just 3 simple questions, and then we can go forward with the Q&A.
Okay, well, I'm just going to leave this screen up in case people want to write down kind of any of my information to ask any follow-up questions after the session, or potentially to get a referral.
What's the youngest person that you've helped with a communication device?
Well, I will specify, so our clinic at the Assistive Technology Center, we tend to see mostly adults. So I see a fair number of transition age youth. So, you know, maybe ages 18 to 26. There are plenty of clinics around town that specialize more with pediatric augmentative communication. So Nationwide Children's has a great program, Columbus Speech and Hearing, the Ohio State Speech Language Hearing Program, lots of different options. Our clinic does tend to focus a little bit more on the medical needs of adults. And then children's takes a lot of the younger cases.
Do we have any teachers on this call? I wanted to quickly share an app on the phone, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, you pull it up really quick. So it's for this app,
Okay.
okay? And what I like about it, I am hearing impaired. I put the word communication, all right? Can you see the picture? All right,
Mhm.
I'm going to push loop. So it allows you to watch it over and over until you learn.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring this up is we were working at the Open Door, and there's a gentleman there who, very similar to my brother, who was nonverbal all his life, and his staff said, well, he's got to wait a year to get a communication device. And I said, well, let's start talking a language now. It's very easy. It doesn't require sound, but at least getting him in that mindset that he can participate rather than just
No, I
depend
love
on
that
other
you bring
people.
that up. And I want to mention that, you know, I did kind of stick with technology mostly for this presentation because it's about assistive technology, but there are lots of forms of communication that don't involve anything techy. So this can range from just a simple paper board with options on it to, you know, ASL signs or again, like gesture or facial expressions. So lots of different forms of communication that don't involve technology. And all forms of technology are welcome, or all forms of communication rather. So you notice in my little heading there, I have come say, sign, type, or wave hello. Lots of different ways to do it.
Yes, I'm going to be sending whatever links we talked about in an email that will have the survey as well in case you can't do it now. And so what you see, is a PowerPoint available to us?
Yes,
Okay, so you can send that to me when you have a chance.
absolutely.
Yes. I'm just curious of the people that joined us, how many have someone in mind that might benefit from this? Any other questions, ideas, thoughts? Oops, someone just said I do. I'm creating an educational program, so I'd like to incorporate some of these. Frank would like to know, what is mirroring?
Okay, which one do you want me to answer first?
Let's do it in order. Creating an education program, so I'd like to incorporate some of these.
Okay. So when you say creating an educational program, would you say that you mostly operate within schools? Do you have a community clinic? Because the answer kind of changes depending on what environment you're hoping to implement the tools in.
Tanya, do you want to share that, what you're thinking? Oh, she said university, faculty, staff, and students.
Neat. Okay. So I think that especially if you're within OSU, adult learners, awesome. Okay. It would be, that would definitely be a kind of a larger conversation. I know at the OSU, on the school side, they have like a TOPS program for young adults who are attending college and using assistive technology to meet those goals. In terms of having certain devices on site for use, I know that, for instance, SCOM, which is a company that makes a device for hearing impaired people, will have, the departments can purchase that device so that people with hearing impairment can type back and forth to communicate. So there are so many possible answers to this question, and it would really depend on kind of what kinds of people you're looking to serve, what communication disabilities they happen to have. And it also, it will depend on kind of department resources and training, because as you can tell, the person using the technology needs to be trained on it, but also typically a lot of other members of the team need to be trained too, so that the device and the individual can be fully supported. So I would love to talk more about that. And certainly Dr. Sontag is on this call, and she works within a university setting in an AAC clinic, and that could be a really great connection for you. But I like the idea of working to make your environment more accessible to people with communication disabilities.
Yeah, and also once this is edited, you can go back and review it now that you had an idea of what Audrey had presented. Maybe it'll make a better picture for you.
Well, and as you can tell, it's like, you can get the smorgasbord of technology options, but then the skill of knowing kind of which ones are the best setting, the best choice for your environment, what training needs are associated, that would be a conversation offline.
Okay,
sure.
so Frank had asked about mirroring, and then Danielle has something, and I'll read that to you when we get there.
Okay, so Frank, mirroring is basically, I don't know if you know about casting, but you can take a phone screen. So say this is my phone screen, and I'm pulling up this app here. This app might be a little too small for someone to use. And so I can have a special program on a tablet that takes this image and projects it on a larger device screen like this. And so once this image is blown up, sorry, I just told everyone
I live in Columbus.
by accident. But you can basically take, this small device screen and project it onto a larger screen. And that's especially good for people who need to use a method like eye gaze or head mouse to operate their phone. Like maybe their phone isn't accessible anymore, but if they can get a big projected copy of their phone, all of a sudden they can operate the controls again. Does that make sense?
So is it like syncing the phone?
Yes,
Syncing,
kind of.
Kind of, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
It's like you have the same display on your phone as you do on an external device. And again, it's mostly used for people who have trouble accessing their phones for whatever reason.
Did that answer your question, Frank?
It's also a hard word to say, mirroring.
It is a hard word. Well, while Frank is thinking about it, Danielle said, I have someone on my caseload who interestingly does speak, but only at home around his family. He is actually Amish and can speak both English and Dutch. I'd love to be able to talk to him, to be able to hear more from him, but unfortunately, because he is Amish, we have a barrier with technology as well.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that if he's Amish, he probably wouldn't be, it wouldn't be kind of within his belief system to use a smartphone or a tablet for communication. Is that right?
It sounds like, yes.
Yeah. In which case, I talked a lot about communication technology, but because that was the kind of topic of this webinar series, but there is a whole range of other communication methods. Okay, and it would depend on, if your individual is literate, is he equally literate in both languages or more dominant in one? That would kind of help me answer the question more specifically. But one of the programs that Deb showed, could be an idea, learning certain manual signs that wouldn't include use of a device or writing to communicate instead of typing. And then if he is more dominant in Dutch, for instance, there are technology options that will allow you to translate or even just take a picture of what he's written and have that translated into English for you. So with language barriers, even if he's not personally using the technology, there are methods that you can use to kind of help translate his message into a form that you understand.
I have a question, Danielle. Is he allowed to use technology at the day program? Yeah, I'm almost thinking having signs, some kind of conversation connector would be a great start. I haven't ever asked that, but I am planning to. That'd be
Okay.
great.
Yeah, it's a good start just to see kind of to narrow down a little to what communication system would be most accessible and preferred to use. But again, you can certainly take a what we call multimodal approach, like many different methods. So manual signs, writing, and potentially use of technology if the family and the individual is willing. Awesome.
Yeah, I know there's a difference between Mennonite and Amish, but I could ask some of my Mennonite friends what they might suggest as well. So Danielle, I have your email if that's something you want to be connected to. Write it down. The hard one.
Yeah, and you'll notice that throughout this Q&A session, similar to when I ask people how well they're able to communicate and they say it depends. A lot of times if you ask me a broad question about communication, my first answer is just, well, it depends. So I'm sorry I can't be more specific. But that's what these in-person conversations or online conversations are for.
Are there any more questions? Well, if not, Audrey, thank you so much for sharing the importance of communication devices. I'm a geek at heart, so I love hearing about this kind of stuff. Sometimes I don't like it. I'm sure everyone says that. But it opens up so many doors to connect us as a people. I do want to remind everybody that I did put a link in, or 2 links in the chat. One is for next week's presentation, which is on gaming devices. That should be a lot of fun. I have someone in mind I know that needs to come. And then the following week at the same time, we will have Christine and Gabby present on the smart home. So hopefully you'll join us again, share the information you learned today, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Yeah, so just to review kind of what smart home is, it's the way you can use existing devices or new devices to control different elements of your home, including your thermostat, lights, doors, monitoring systems, even your bed controls, like lots of different options. So I can't wait for you to attend and learn more. And these systems all work together too. Like I said, speech generating device can be used in the context of adaptive gaming, and it can be used in the context of smart home too.
Well, thank you again all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thank you, Audrey, so much.
Looking forward to speaking more with some of you. Thanks so much for having me.